Hi guys, welcome to the Church Split. My name is Will. You guys might recognize this is not my normal studio, but that's because I am joined with a good friend of mine and my pastor, Brett Nicholson. So I actually wanted to interview him for a while now to talk about church splits, church planting, and all the things that kind of come involved and all that, which is quite a bit. And many people know that the church split is born out of experiencing church splits myself as a pastor, and I was shocked when I first started even dealing with any of that because, of course, when you go to Bible college, you get this vision of just, oh, things are going to be wonderful. We all love Jesus. We're all going to be best friends and kumbaya around the campfire. And not always. So that's what I learned. That's one of those things where I'm like, when you have someone like yourself who's been seasoned in ministry, it is always fascinating to me to hear somebody else who's done it longer than me and kind of glean from that wisdom. What have you learned from it and all those things? So this is not an episode about me. It's an episode about you and what we can learn from you. And I really appreciate you being willing to just sit down and talk about it.
Yeah, and I appreciate getting to talk about it because we have when we knew the name of your deal. Well, a few of us on staff said, "Well, one of these days, if you ever really want to hear some things, we've got some stuff." So that's
I had a few of y'all come out of the woodwork and be like, "We got stories for you."
Been through it, yeah, absolutely. And what we have here wasn't from a church split, but it was from a splant, and you. We talked about defining that. So
So real quick, how long have you been pastoring, would you say?
I'm right under 30 years. 26 will be 30 years. So yeah, 29 years. That's when I always mark it as that was my first year of truly being full-time. I had done part-time things before that. I had done kind of eased into things. But as far as being on a staff at a church, wearing the suit and tie, going to the hospitals and all that sort of stuff, that was 29 years ago.
You don't wear suit and ties anymore.
So, well, they did back in the real days. They did, yeah. That was required at the church that
Some people, that was more recent than others. But anyhow,
right.
Now you've been doing this a long time, and you've learned a lot, I'm sure, through it. And so what are some things, looking back, you've been pastoring at One Life now here at the church, and for almost, 15 years?
We're going on 15 years, yeah.
15 years, right, okay. And so before that, you were at other churches, you've done other things. So we called this a splant. One Life was a splant, right, which is a church split plant, right? Yes. Is that a good way to just define that?
Yeah, and I've said that from the platform. I've been very public about that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So what all took place there? Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing and then what led to even planting One Life, then how did all that kind of interwork? And then I'd like to talk about what we can learn from those lessons and how to help other pastoral ministers out there. Because
absolutely, yeah.
It's one of those things that for those who might not be in ministry or whatever, it's not something that you usually train you for in Bible college. They're more worried about Ugaritic texts and stuff.
Things, but yeah.
And leadership stuff. But yeah, that's not something you're always trained for. So so what were you doing before you did One Life, and kind of lead us into that a little bit?
So I grew up at the church that I ended up working at that we came from, and that had the splant experience. So I arrived there as a freshman in high school, so it goes way back for me. And I was a troublemaking high school kid, but I was there. I do credit the youth pastor that was there, who is still, he's not a youth pastor anymore, but he's still at the same church. God used him to save my life. Absolutely. I mean, he was the guy I went to. I'll never forget that. That's why I honor youth pastors. I mean, he was the guy I went to, and he was patient to listen to me, put up with me when I would look all fixed up, and then I would leave again, and then I would come back a wreck, and then he'd kind of fix me up, and I'd leave again and come back. I went back and forth. So that's the place I was.
You were that kid.
So yeah, I was that kid.
I know that kid.
And, yeah, that's right. Everybody knows that kid, right? I was that guy. And so I ended up on staff at the church, kind of fast forwarding, and our offices were next to each other. I mean, that was one of the coolest things for me. And he brought me in when there was a special event he did, and let me honor him and all that kind of thing. And he honored me in kind of a fast forwarding several years. But I will always say that because I did have one last time where I came in as a wreck, and it was different this time, and that's the one that I was kind of marked when I truly came to Jesus in a real way and really understood and started walking with him, felt called to ministry. And he was the one that sat me down, helped me get into the school I got into, and just kind of gave me that guidance system. Then I went away to school, got married in the meantime, the whole decade of the 80s. And then I came back I didn't expect to come back, but I came back and lived here in Evansville, where we are. Went to that as my home church because it was a very natural place to go. Absolutely, always loved it. And but I was doing another thing. Some friends of ours, my wife and mine, we got together and we were doing college ministry, and we set up a parachurch ministry thing that was in association with the church. And that was actually technically the first split I ever went through. And that one was a theological one, because the church that I was, my home, we were all going there. But there people in that ministry started disagreeing with a lot of the things, and it was stylistic, it was things like that, but it bled into theology during this. We can unpack that if you want. But I went through my first true relational ministry split with that. And because of what was going on in the church, and I stayed with the church, and they all left. A number of them were reconciled now, but that's where that came from. And so I stayed at that church, and then I started doing things like I kept up the ministry, the college ministry that they did. I became the college guy for that, and I kind of eased in to being an employee for that church and started doing things like hospital visits. And they just would ask me, hey, I was part-time. I was just kind of around, taught a Sunday school class, did all the things. And just gradually over time, and my favorite moment was they finally let me preach in the big room. It's a 1,500 seat auditorium, because this was a church that had the big choir in the back, that had a TV show, that was kind of a larger place in town. And they called me to have me preach for the very first time, and he said it was for the Wednesday night between Christmas and New Year's. but I didn't know. I thought, oh, my moment has come. I'm going to stand in the pulpit and do the thing. And I was, oh man, and I prepared for that thing so much. And it was my family, my extended family, filled up a couple of rows, and I think there were about like 16 other people kind of spread throughout the auditorium. But I preached my guts out, and there was one of the staff guys that was there for it, because he was the one that asked me, somebody's got to babysit me, right? And he was impressed enough where he was like, hey, we're going to, and so eventually I started just kind of going up through all that. And that's how I ended up at the church, and over time ended up being I was a little bit of everything by the time it was all over. I was a college guy, I was an adult education guy, I was a worship leader, I was the associate pastor, I became the executive pastor, and on and on and on it went over time. But I loved it there, and I planned on being there my whole life.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah. So that's kind of the background to the splant thing anyway, where it came from. So
Gotcha. Okay. So now when you mentioned that parachurch organization, to just rewind a little bit, that where you first experienced that, you said there was actually like a theological split there that ended up happening. It also bled into practical things.
Oh, yeah.
And during what years were this? Was this like the 80s and 90s?
This is 1994, because for the longest time in my life, until I had another terrible year, 1994 was my year that I would say is worst year of my life. Absolutely. It was horrible, because I went through that thing of absolute total unity, having a blast, going in ministry together. We were entrepreneurs. We were ready to take over the world kind of stuff. And that cracking just wrecked me huge. It was like going through a divorce. It was terrible.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Probably a little.
It was awful.
Yeah, definitely understand
that was 1994. I marked it that year, but then I started doing stuff for the church.
Okay, gotcha. Now, curious for the audience, and I'm not sure if you want to say, if you feel free to not, if you don't want to, what sort of theological disagreements actually would have caused something like that?
Well, it bleeds over into ministry philosophy stuff. It was during the 90s was the original, I would say, the original worship wars, and that was spurned on by Willow Creek Community Church. That was very well known back in those days. I don't know how much it is now. They're probably looked at as heretics and everything else. But there was a movement among the boomers. They were kind of leading, and the guys that were with me. I'm not a boomer. They were kind of over me. There was a movement that was a reaction against the very traditional trappings of the 1950s style stuff with the choir in the back and the robes and all that. It came out of the Jesus movement is where it came from. Right. And these guys, the guys I worked with, were out of the Jesus movement. And they wanted to do sort of the more rock and roll kind of stuff and all that, which I was all about because that's my background. More on that later. But so it was a big split in the church, but where it became a theological thing, John MacArthur wrote a book called Ashamed of the Gospel. And he tried to give it a theological thing that he attacked what he called pragmatism. There's pragmatism in ministry. Churches are doing dramas and they're doing music, and that's obviously not what the New Testament told us to do. And these guys got a hold of that thinking.
Oh, I see.
And because we're John MacArthur fans at the time. We were going through, because verse by verse stuff was fascinating. We were all into that. But then he attacked that, and then I could tell he was attacking the church I was in, that we were all in. I could kind of,
and you're like, wait, hold on a minute.
And also the parachurch ministry we were doing was kind of in that same stylistic world. So we ended up getting into a huge debate about that whole practical. It's a theological thing. Is pragmatism, and the spin that he put on it was that, because the book actually pulls in Charles Spurgeon and all this sort of business. And so that got us in that debate. And finally, those guys found a church that was all about that and reaction against it. And I stayed home. And but the good thing about it, it had me do a very deep dive into the challenges and the accusations that were brought against that world.
Yeah, because it's like, well, and coming from someone who's raised fundamentalist Baptist, where we looked at anyone who, with what we do here at church, we're a bunch of worldly, carnal.
Yeah. It was that same thing.
It's that same thing, the pragmatism. So I definitely hear that. So I can see though how that would encourage you to do the deep dive into, all right, what is the implications theologically? Can God work within this? Does God work within the pragmatic? Does he work within what we consider, for lack of a better term, cultural relevance and all that stuff?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And where's that allowed, where it's not allowed, all those lines. And I did it in the fire of, because I was very naive. I mean, because we were all in that, and this church is where I trusted everything. It really caught me off guard, and especially coming from a respected, radio voice like a major teacher like John MacArthur. So it really wrecked me. And plus, because it was relationships, I was fueled to really dig down deep.
Right,
and
you were trying to
deep into
recover it, maybe.
And incidentally, that's why we do the things the way we do. And I'll go toe to toe with anybody on that stuff now because I'm ready. Because it was a movement of pain that sent me into really examining all that stuff.
Well, I mean, I could definitely relate with that. I experienced similar things when I was pastoring, back up in Michigan, where we were dealing with stuff. And oddly enough, the stuff that caused the church splits were the things actually that spurred me to actually do deeper dives on various topics where I'm like, well, maybe I could be wrong, or maybe there is something to that. And then the more and more I became so grounded, and I was like, no, this is right. That is actually not true. And so but now again, in some of those stories myself, I'll go toe to toe with anyone on it because now I know it so thoroughly. So in a sense,
exactly.
I'm thankful for it. There's a benefit to some of the garbage.
Oh, yeah. I have been around long enough to know that if you just hang in there, God will redeem things and bring them purpose. And I have discovered that. And the main guy that I had been joined with that we split, because he was my very best friend in the world, we have reunited and doing great these days. And yeah.
So redemption is possible, and reconciliation, all that stuff during that stuff.
It was a long time ago, but we have, and it's good stuff.
Good, awesome. All right, so that explains some of that a little bit, and I think a lot of people could probably relate with some of that because I remember the worship wars being a thing, and I was a kid,
right.
And I mean that's how heated it was. That even as a kid, I'm like, I remember that.
Let alone I was a worship leader, so I was. Oh my goodness!
You felt, that was every day that ended in a Y with you. So then, from there, you were working at this church, and then you guys have chosen to birth One Life out of it. Now, for those of you who are just watching, who've never attended One Life, I joke around on my channel that I now minister at the really loud hipster church, right. And it's just because we got a little bit more of that modern rustic and all that. Right. So, But the reality is, if I do warn people, like if you're coming to my church, just so you know, it's loud and proud, and it's the way it is. Yeah. So it is different than even a lot of evangelical churches that still even do contemporary stuff. We take it and we almost dial it to 10, and it's kind of fun. So what made you go from here working at this church that you're like, man, I'm going to be here my entire life, and to now shifting to being like, well, let's plant this, and then is eventually this plant. So what started shifting you that direction?
And this is about the church split part of the splant thing. And basically what happened was, with that framing, this was the church I was at. That's the world they came from. One of the earliest TV ministries in the whole country. I mean, it was early '60s, and they did that. They were innovative to their credit, and that's why I like being there. And the guys that I worked with, they were established in the '30s, came all the way through. It was like the third largest church in town, and they were known for big Easter pageant kind of stuff. We've all seen those in the living Christmas tree, and we did all those things, known for the choir, the whole bit. But I got to know the pastor. He and I became good friends as I was just coming up in there. Again, I was just kind of sort of a part-time guy that just did a bunch of stuff and preached on those days that no one else wanted to and all that sort of stuff, and just sort of made my way up and got put in charge of more and more things. And he and I connected, and what I discovered about him was that he wanted to do a full-on, he was the senior pastor of this, robe and choir thing.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be the pastor of a full-on, let's go for it, full contemporary thing like a lot of churches around the country were doing. And it was mainly around music, but it was also the vibe and everything. And well, that's my background. So I've been in rock bands since I was in high school. My brother did. My friend circle, my best friend in life, our parachurch ministry was going to be surrounded by a rock band thing. That's my world. I understand it. I know it. And I also know that a lot of my musician friends had come to Christ, and we all ended up at that church. And I would just tell them, I said, dude, we could do this tomorrow, what you're talking about, because we got one of the best drummers in the city, best guitar players in the city, and all this sort of thing. So what I loved about him, he was the world's best earliest adopter. I mean, because he said, I remember one conversation we had where he literally walked me in the other room. There was the people that were planning the worship service. He walked me in, sat me down, and he said, Brett's in charge now. And they all looked at me like, excuse, because I was the college guy at that point, and I was just sort of this young dude on staff or whatever. And you can imagine the level of people, all that. But it didn't automatically happen, and we made all these different tries for it, and we were committed to staying unified. We didn't want to run everybody off, but we kept trying and trying and trying and trying. And we still had a choir, we had an orchestra, and I would try to mix things. And I was the worship pastor. That was the thing he put me in charge of. And I still remember one Easter, we said, we're going for it. We're just going for it. We're just going to pull the pin on the grenade.
Full
and do
send.
it. No lead up, no nothing. We're just going.
Hail Mary.
And another buddy of mine that worked on our staff, he was in the lobby while we were doing it, and he was counting the people leaving. He was Easter. I mean, it just, the thing goes up. We made so many people mad. And it was a stupid thing to do. But we and then that's when I came to him. I said, listen, obviously it's in working and all that. And then through all that, he also had me. We had a Wednesday night church. For those of you who remember Wednesday night church,
Yeah.
Sunday night church. So we had a Wednesday night church. It was kind of flailing along and everything. And in the meantime, they said, well, why don't you take that? Because we know you like to teach. We know you teach and all that. Go over there because no one's doing it. And it was kind of a blank slate that I got to do. So I told the pastor, I said, why don't you let me experiment with these guys? You're giving me this service. Let's just do that. No one goes anyway. I mean, what do we got to lose? So
No one's there.
So we set up this, they became my worship team, and then I was going to teach, and they were going to be the worship team. And so gathered up friends, and the worship leader we have to this day, she was just key to pulling all these people together, and we did it. We practiced. We were good. I mean, we were really good. My brother was a professional musician for years. He's a front man, he's a great bass player and all this stuff, had a fantastic drummer, the whole package. And we were awesome, but I knew even the people that did show up on a Wednesday night probably were all 50 plus. We're going to send them out of the room. So I was like, what do we do? And that's when I learned, and I'm pretty sure Jesus didn't quite mean this, but it applied. You can't pour new wine into an old wineskin. Can't put new wine in an old wineskin. And it was like, we're trying to hold the church together, but why don't we? I can't use them here, but I know they're good and I know it's right because they were passionate. They were prayed up. And we said, why don't we do this? We'll have a 9 o'clock service where we'll say, and a lot of churches did this, a lot of traditional service. We're not going to change a thing. We're done. You don't have to leave. And at the 11 o'clock, because this is kind of what we wanted to do, here's what it's going to be. And we warned everybody, like, it's going to be loud. It's going to look like a concert. It's going to all the things.
Yeah, right.
And we just said, all right, let's just experiment. That was for Sunday morning. And so when we did, it took off and that church had been plateaued attendance-wise for probably about a decade, close to a decade. And we had gone through all kinds of things, and it just took off and it started growing. And so much that we're in a Tom Rainer book called Breakout Churches. They kind of featured us and studied us. We met their criteria and all that kind of stuff. And that's when we hit kind of a momentum stride. Now, all that's a setup to that was also the beginning of what became what we know as the splant thing. Because as it was going, first of all, we all had worked for it. We all, I'm talking the leadership team, senior pastor, everybody had been through all the people leaving Easter and all the fails.
Right.
Well, then we hit the success. And it did work. It was successful. I mean, it was young families were coming in, baptisms were starting to shoot up and everything. It was known as being this awesome place to be and all the rest. And it was kind of the dream come true. And the senior pastor was like, yeah, we did it. It was sort of we did it thing. And but over time, and this went on. This was an 8-year thing. And growing every year consistently, start to develop teams, develop a culture. Now, rewinding back, the senior pastor had told me privately, back when I was kind of the college guy, up and coming guy, he said, you know what, Brett, I think you're going to be the next senior pastor. He did tell me that. I believe you're the next. He didn't say you will be. He just said, I believe you will be.
Right.
And he told me, he said, and I want you to get yourself ready. And at this time, my wife and I were talking about this, knowing I was going to have this conversation. I asked her, what do you remember about the conversation? I came home. We were both like, what the heck? I mean, well, because, yeah, this big church, TV and all that.
Yeah.
And so it was, I'm just this young guy. I didn't really know much. But he said, get yourself ready. And he also said, my wife remembered this, it'll be sooner than you think. And so I'm operating on that system for a while. I don't think he ever told anybody else, but over time, because I became the executive pastor. I was a worship pastor, executive pastor. I was a little bit of everything.
Right.
And I was the second in charge in the end. And so what happened over time is it was open and it was known culturally speaking. Well, yeah, Brett, because the senior pastor was approaching the age I am now, and everybody was kind of looking at their watch, and all that, like they are with me now. And okay, what's going to happen? It became the assumed cultural thing, and it seemed very natural. That's going to be the next era, and we all talked openly about that. But then where the splant part came is when he obviously started having some struggles and doubts, and I think the main reason was because my personality, as it were, fit the new thing more than him. Originally, I was just a music guy. We would do the music, and I would preach in there like once a month. And then he would preach the other 3. We did fine. But whenever I would preach, it wasn't like I was superior. It was just I matched the environment more, like I do in life.
You fit this really well, as opposed to getting like.
Yeah, it feels natural to hear from the way I talk, the way I deliver things, and all that fits all the goofy stuff we do there. I mean, it just does.
Right.
So, and I wouldn't fit in another place, and it became that, and that became an observation. So we flipped it, and it's growing, and it's like now I'm 3 and he's 1, and I really think, in all sympathy to him, he started feeling like he had lost his place. And admittedly, it was happening, but it fit because of the transition to the new day,
Right.
But then that started hitting some choppy waters when it actually came up in a meeting, and this was another business guy that brought it up. And then all of a sudden, we started seeing him kind of say, wait a minute, no, stop the train. And then I'll let you kind of examine that. But that's what essentially happened, and the debates that rose out of that he started saying, I don't think you're going to be the next guy, and that wasn't the only vision that we had and everything else, and it became a debate about the future of the church, and it looked like he was going to reassert a certain level of authority and leadership that those of us who had worked on this other thing so much, we thought it was going to get lost. And so the splant part is where we came to a compromising thing. Why don't we take this thing that we developed that was known in the city now? Why don't we plan it out and let it be its own thing? and even changing the name, because the name of the church was very kind of dated and all that. And One Life was what we had all agreed on, was like, for lots and lots of reasons. And that was the plan originally, like set up almost like a church planting organization is what we did. And that church had actually come up with not only TV, but they had started other organizations. So we said, so that was the compromise. And so it was a true plant because under that
moniker, so to speak.
Yeah, under that goal, which was agreed to. But the process of getting there was splitty in terms of personalities, and you could tell there was undercurrents going on, and people got upset. I got upset, and wives and husbands got upset, and all that. That's the relational side started cracking, and that's why I always called it that, because everybody kind of could feel it. Everybody could tell, because we used to be. Man, we had a leadership team. I used to look forward to those meetings. We used to laugh till we cried. It was awesome. I always said I worked there for 15 years. 14 years, had an absolute blast. 1 year was absolutely miserable, but that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a pretty good ratio, right?
Exactly, but people could feel that going on. It went from, we could tell.
Well, it also makes sense in a sense from his perspective, maybe, where it's like he always wanted to pass. Really wanted to pastor this kind of church. You finally find the success story, and then, you fit that vibe better. It's like, because again, it's not like I would call, some fuddy-duddy Baptist, not saying he was, but just as an example, to come in here and preach at One Life, that would feel weird, culturally speaking. Yeah. So I get that. Yeah.
And then I do have a lot of sympathies for that. I really do. And I get it. Plus, it was getting towards retirement age, and there became debates about that. How does that even work? Should you? When do you do? How does that work? Also knowing he had practical problems, like, what am I going to do with myself? And I think there was a threatened thing going on there, and so that became more not about me and him as much as him and others.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of undercurrent relational stuff that was far beyond stylistic issues or whatever.
Right.
So that was where things really got.
So then, was there a particular time that you said, "All right, that's it"? Where someone just came out and said, "One Life is on its own." Like, when did that? Like, was there a thing with that?
Yeah, for one, in my own heart and life, I thought I'd be there till the day I died. My house was right behind the church, and I used to joke, "Hey, they can just bury me in the backyard. I'm fine." I didn't plan on going anywhere. It's my home church. Loved it. And I remember during a service one Sunday, it was great. Things were going great, and I could sense something was not right. And I literally felt prompted by the Lord to go pray. It was November 1st, 2009. And I for the first time in years, I felt kind of disoriented about my sense of call and clarity. First time. And I literally remember praying, "All right, Lord," and it's not a brag on me or anything. It was one of those moments. You have those every now and then. "Lord, I'll clean toilets. I don't care. I just want to know what you want me to do." And that's where the vision for One Life came. And I knew I had to do what I had been doing plus. And what was going on there, you could read the handwriting on the wall, was it's not going to be that plus. It's going to be probably more of a watered down version of what I perceived was very important. And that's when my wife and I got home from the prayer time and shared with her. And I always put it in my journal, like, we could tell it was the Lord because we were both, and much like you did, come here, we could tell it was the Lord because we were just kind of willing to live in our car.
Yep.
I mean, it was kind of like, hey, we're to seek first the kingdom. All these things will be added. And we had kids. I had a pretty good job. I mean, I get it.
I get it.
But we were literally of that heart. We're like, hey, all right, we're in. We're doing this. And that's when it crossed over and we started having those dialogues. We don't want this thing that we built for the last many years to die. Can we farm it out, as it were, and as a whole new thing? And we do. And that's where One Life Network came from. That was the original moniker to that.
Gotcha. Okay.
The process was a little ugly.
And one of the things, there's lots of ugliness. So one of the things with One Life, and then I'd love for you to talk about like what you learned from the splits, what people can be on the lookout for, kind of idea, just like what to learn from that. But one thing I did want to make sure I talked about, because I understand that like Callie and I, like you already know this, I had a job where I made great money, and all I kept thinking was every single day when I went to work was how much it was sucking my soul. And like everyone else would kill for the job I had, and I was like, and I kept being like, Lord, just take away this desire for ministry if this is not what you want. It's like, nope, actually you're just going to be increasingly be miserable. But no opportunities came up until
Right.
eventually One Life came, and through many various obvious signs made this happen.
Right.
But one of the things that attracted me to One Life was one of my biggest frustrations that I had fought at every church I had served at was a lack of, what's the word, having a pulse on the cultural conversation. And it was very frustrating because it's like, this is what's going on. This is why your kids are leaving the church. No, really what it is that we need this kind of music. No, we just need a better curriculum. And, we got to switch from orange to whatever the new curriculum, the newest and hottest. And I'm like, no, there's other conversations happening, and we don't even, like, apologetics. And most churches, I ain't apologizing for my faith. And I'm like, that's not what it is. But you need to understand that this is why your kids are falling away from the faith. They have no intellectual reasons. So anyway, I go on our website and I look at our website and I'm looking for the doctrinal statement because that's what most churches will make you swear to. And instead I almost find like a vision statement that's like, we're committed to intellectual integrity, communicating to this culture. And I'm like, it's like I made these people in a computer. This is exactly what I was looking for. Anyway, so real quick, I'd love for you to mention because you had 4 values I'd written down a while ago, but that was about intellectual integrity, spiritual power, artistic creativity, and missional thinking. Yep. And those were some of the things. So what was it that made you go, this is what the culture needs?
Well, I guess I got to lay a foundation a little bit. I spent when I was that kid in youth ministry and all that, I spent time, my best friends and the best friend I referenced a while ago, with literal unchurched people. I mean, like this best friend of mine had never heard of Jesus until he was going through his dad's album collection and he found Jesus Christ Superstar. And he's an upper middle class guy. So these were just people that when I told them I was going back to church and I got saved and all this kind of thing, they looked at me like I might have been a Martian. I mean, they just couldn't. I'm like, you're going to do what? Like, so I spent time in that culture. And one of my life mottos is, especially in ministry, is give what you've been given. And so I came to Christ, and then I watched their reactions. I listened to their questions. I experienced their pushback and my own pushback and everything. And so I became missional towards them. And so I would always argue most Christian people who are at least halfway in tune with life or relationships, they can feel where people are in terms of their knowledge, their background, their conversation, their experiences, their questions, their doubts, their faith levels. You kind of almost intuitively know that if you're having a serious discussion about faith.
Right.
So I had those things a lot. And then I have my own issues. I mean, I had hang-ups with the Christian church. I mean, but I knew I was saved, and I knew God had called me. And so he allowed me to work through all that stuff and get my questions answered and all this. And really, in the end, what One Life is just giving what I've been given. It's like, and it was a combination of those things. And on November 1st, what God showed me, and I got charismatic background a little bit here, so I do. I mean, I believe God. I had encounters and stuff, and so on that day, I was just reminded on the deepest part of me: intellectual integrity, spiritual power, artistic creativity, and missional thinking. That's what I'm made of. That's what I was called to. That's what I was built for. That's what I'm going to do. And if the elders at our church tomorrow say, we don't want to do any of that stuff, I'd say, well, fine. I'd go somewhere and do those things. I have to do them. It's
right.
In
part of
that
your
combination,
DNA.
because that combination was the thing that put me over the line. It wasn't just apologetics, but it was present. And I got to go to a university where we had fun conversations. I love college. Spiritual power was there too. I had experiences and stuff and saw things and experienced things and all that. Art, that's my background, music and all that. I always wondered, why is Christian stuff so bad? When I knew for a fact back in history it wasn't bad. You had Bach, and then you had, what the heck is this? And you had everything.
Yeah.
Why are Christian films bad?
It went from Michelangelo to, the Christian films.
That was a serious question for me.
Yeah.
If this is really the people of God, why do they suck so bad at this? So, and I found the answers to that stuff to my own liking anyway, and so that was a huge value. And then missional thinking in the end is that, and I've served overseas and worked with people in far very, very difficult places to reach. And everybody does that intuitively when they're Christians. They go into other cultures and they learn, they understand, they figure out their background. I worked in Muslim countries and had a class full of Muslim students, and it was fascinating to listen to what they asked me. Their issues are not what our issues are.
Right.
The first class I ever did, the guy asked me, he came up to me, he said, "Why do Christians worship three gods?" I'm like, okay, I'm prepared, for the Trinity talk, And it wasn't that. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, God, Jesus, and Mary. Oh. From his view as a Muslim in a very, very Muslim country, that's what he meant by that. And I didn't even see it coming. It was like a knuckleball. It's like, whoa,
what just happened?
I haven't had to answer a Mary question in forever. So, but point being that we had a great conversation, but we know those things that we do, and that's what I mean by missional thinking. My new nickname for it is contextualization. The Bible contextualizes, the early missionaries contextualize. You can look in the book of Acts, and you can see their contextualization by the summary sermons that are recorded there. That was a deep study I did coming out of the John MacArthur bit. I mean, you can watch it in real time.
100%.
And I cherish that, and so that's an operational system that we have. So the cultural conversation thing, especially, and I credit my university with this, Here are the things that started with the Enlightenment. Here that made us what we are. Made us where Christianity went from being the assumed truth to the questioned truth, and why that happened. And I'm big. Francis Schaeffer was a big part of that, and a number of others were part of that observation about culture and through art. Why did it go from Sistine Chapel to, Jackson Pollock with the things? I never thought about that with just splatters. Well, that was a statement. It was philosophy. It was meaningless of life and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So all of those things added up to the practicalities that I see, and that's why I always kind of think that way. Like, okay, what's really going on here? That's why when I did the study of the trans thing, it landed on philosophy. It wasn't just, hey, should you or shouldn't you? It was like, why is this even here?
Yeah. Why? Where does it even come from?
Deep, hard. Well, that's a whole other thing, but very deep philosophical roots that came out of the French, post-Enlightenment stuff and all that.
Right. Well, and if you want to check out his trans stuff, by the way, I do have on the channel of Detransition. It's a little documentary video we did, but you can go on the One Life Network's YouTube page and you can watch the work that you brought.
One hardly anybody watches, but should be watches, where I talked to, there's a philosophy prof that goes to our church, and I interviewed him about
Dr. Mercer?
Yeah, Dr. Mercer here. And I interviewed him about it because his specialty is European philosophy. And and he talked through all that, where it came from and why it's relevant to this.
So definitely check it out on the One Life Network channel. So, and that's actually one of the cool things. This is kind of the bleeding of the network situation here. But
that's right.
This is really cool.
Right.
I love it. So, no, that was one of the things for me, because like intellectual integrity, something I'm very passionate about, and it's mainly because I came from the King James only movement of Baptists that was like there's no intellectual integrity whatsoever. And I mean, and I finally got to the point where it's like I can't square the circle, and then they're like, "Well, you're out." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'm out." I don't really mind. I regularly say, like, it's not like I left them, they left me. But but then the spiritual power out, I don't have a charismatic background, but I learned to appreciate it, right, over time. And I am an artist myself, so that idea as well, just all these things were things that I'm like, finally, somebody else noticed this. It was so refreshing. So, and I guess to say that even though it was a splant, there's all these different things. Yesterday alone, we baptized people still in the name of Jesus. We're seeing this mission come to life. However, it means that there's a lot of bumps, there's a lot of bruises, there's a lot of pain along the way. And I know you're giving me you're giving the audience the template version. I mean, we'd probably be here hours regaling us to the details. But as someone who can look back over life and go, okay, we've planted this, multi-site One Life Network thing. We're doing the missional thing. We're doing the loud and proud music, but we're also there is a real presence of how we approach with the Holy Spirit and empowering the people with an artistic bend while also being involved in artistic conversations artistically, but then also apologetics as well, being part of it. It was this first church I've been to where I'm not training the pastor or the other leadership in it. Like, you already know it. We have Dr. Braxton Hunter here.
They're everywhere. Yeah,
we got all of that here. So it's it was already present, and it's really cool. So what were some lessons that you've learned along the ways that you would, so someone's watching this, they're going to church or they're seeking ministry either as a lay people or full-time, whatever. What were some things that you would say contributed to the church split, and what can you learn from it, from all these different split situations?
Well, a few things. I'll probably have to look at my notes on this one because I kind of meditated on that. Okay, so one, I get a lot of comfort and I get a lot of warning from the fact of the splits in the New Testament. Most people know about the Paul and Barnabas one. When I did a 2.5-year expositional thing at the church I was at that changed my life. It was the most revolutionary Bible study I ever personally did, was the book of Acts. But Acts chapter 6, in the single most idyllic setting ever the church has ever experienced, where you've got all the guys there, Jesus' mom is there. They've thousands of people. They're adding to it, glowing reports, all those things. It says in chapter 6, it opens up. So the Grecian Jews complained against the Hebraic Jews because they were getting left out in the administration of the food. And I remember seeing that, thinking, "Oh my goodness!" And this is before I ever went through a split thing. It was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen, because even there were people whining and crying and arguing and frustrated, and it was so much that they had to assign, the leadership. It's a setup for the ministry of Stephen, right? So so that's the setup. And then I think about Paul and Barnabas, and I think, when you really step back and examine what these guys would have been through, Barnabas is the one who helped, Paul be accepted into the company of the apostles. And then he got him his first job in Antioch. He called on him. Then they went on mission together. Can you imagine how tight they were, how much they experienced, how much they watched, how much they talked, how close they were, especially the way travel was back then? And those guys had that problem. They argued over it. It was a doctrinal thing. It was just how much grace or whatever it was. And we're not allowed. You wonder, but when I saw that, it's not an excuse, but it really, again, it's a twofold thing. Number one, it's a comfort. And number two, it's a warning. Because it just says, and this is the coaching I got from my boomer pastors that I used to work with. And you heard me talk about this in our staff. And they talk about it when it comes to sexual immorality, because we've all seen many of our colleagues, fall in that way. And they helped me so much in this, because they said, build your life of assuming you can, not assuming you can't. It's hard to do. I am capable of this. Well, I would never. Well, I'm capable, so therefore, I'm going to arrange my life like this. And unity's the same way. Oh, that could never happen, because I was caught off guard, man, because I told you, in love, I had a blast. This was not just, this guy's kind of a fuddy-duddy or whatever. It wasn't that way. We had a blast. That could never happen. So we didn't arrange things to keep it from happening as much, just on an organizational level. And you ask, what could you do different? I wish when he sat me down, because he never denied that conversation, I wish I would have had the presence of mind to say, okay, when you tell me that, what do you mean? What's going through your head right now? My theory, looking back, is he was tired, and he said it premature. And I know that now, because you get tired. And I've been there. Been like, hey, you want to be that? Okay, when? Oh, next week. It's fine. Because I'm out. Bye. Done. So I think he was going through a season like that caused him to say that. But it should have been. Now, I think the fault on his line is he should have done that for me, to say, if this is a real thing, be open about it, and ongoing coaching with it.
Right.
And open conversation. And the main thing is, I would say, obviously open my conversation among leadership, but I started thinking about the content of what those conversations should have been. And I think there should have been always a, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where are you hoping to go? What do you want to be doing 5 years from now? Ask everybody that. And do you feel like we're heading in that basic direction? Or do you feel like, and that's not a bad conversation. It's
right.
I like what I'm doing now, but man, I'd kind of like to be doing something else. And knowing that about each other, because like I said, I think what happened to him was there's sort of a misplacement thing. And then everybody's waiting for me to retire or whatever. Well, I have things I want to do, and places I want to go. But that should have been more open. And the same for me. It should have been, anyway, just being more open about those things would have been helpful to kind of know where everybody is and then projecting the future.
Not looking at it as a bad thing, looking at it as like, hey, look, we're just being honest where we will need to be, want to be, and how can we help get each other there?
But yeah,
right?
because
It's
in
not a bad
ministry
thing.
stuff, when you're really relating, because one of my favorite sayings about church work is there's nothing, there's such a great saying, I forgot what it was. There's nothing like the local church when the local church is working right, because there's not. It can
100%.
be golden. And the other one is the it in life is doing God's will with people you love. And I've experienced that. And I've experienced a lot more of that than the other. But what happens to you is psychologically, it's hard to even fathom we're going to do something different down the road.
Right.
But you will. And there are people I'm not traveling with right now that 10 years ago, I couldn't have even fathomed it, that my life wouldn't have them in the same way. And some of it's just because people they get moved, they have different, their kids change their world, all those kinds of things play in. And so you always want to take each other's pulse and give them one another permission. It's okay. Look at the original disciples. They obviously ended up in different places doing different things. And so
even the Barnabas, like the whole Mark with Paul thing, it's like, and then, hey, we'll bring him along. He's profitable for the ministry, but even though we might not have jived or we didn't share the same vision, Paul, even the apostle Paul went through that.
Yeah, big time.
And
He's as mature as a person you can be with in Barnabas, for every way he's described.
Yeah, and so that's where I could definitely say that I think naivety for me was a big issue similarly, because I had the same thing where it's like, man, I had this vision for the church I was at, and we had gas on. It was amazing. We're out in the middle of nowhere and we're growing. Like, it was like, how is this possible? We're in a cornfield. And but then seeing that get derailed also because of other people, and what it ended up being for us was one person just didn't agree with some of the vision, some of the direction and stuff, and had never voiced it. And it blew up. But it will come to find out it's festering behind the scenes. And I was like, when I got the phone call and this person blew up on me, I was just stunned. It was like, I had no idea any of this was going on. I wish I would know. But then I also look back and go, I probably should have created more opportunity for him to have voiced that, but instead his demeanor, his personality was that everyone else seemed on board. So he was just like, all right, sounds good. And he just said what he thought everyone expected, but instead creating more opportunity for that. But again.
Well, and you use the term creating opportunity. As I look back, the best thing you can do is create that. And as a leader, responsibility of create environments where you can give feedback and you can check with one another. Because the church plant training that I went through, they emphasized a lot. There's your doctrinal stuff and there's your programming stuff. Mm-hmm. But usually the splits happen in the middle between philosophy related to doctrine and programming, but there's this other space. And they said, that's where you want to make sure you're clear before you ever launch. Okay, we believe this, therefore we can do this. And make sure everybody's nodding in the room, and remember they nodded, and make them sign in blood that they nodded. Oh, no, we're not doing this because you listen to John MacArthur on the radio. We're not doing that. That's no more. You can't do that. So that's...
You don't get to change. We have it. Sign in blood.
People show their stuff. You've got to do that.
Well, there's got to be that accountability. Otherwise,
absolutely, and they have to be able to say, but you do have to create environments where you do that. That's why I wish I had said certain things or asked certain questions, but I really do put it on the senior pastor. He should have pulled things out of us. Like, okay, here's what I'm thinking, here's where we're going, and all that sort of stuff.
No, absolutely.
We all assumed things were a certain way. We did. And we had every reason to think that. I had every reason to be completely confident. I was never checked on my job. I was never told I was doing a bad job or any of that. And then all of a sudden at the last minute, it sort of changed in major ways.
Which is quite a bit of whiplash for you.
My wife and I were like, okay, what does that mean for our lives? We've got kids, we got a future, we've got a lot of decisions to make.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I could definitely see how that would be more challenging. And so because I never worked at a church like of that capacity. I always actually worked at smaller churches. So this is actually the biggest church I've ever worked at. So it's kind of fun seeing this side of things. So I'm like, when you add these things exponentially, it just even gets more complicated. And one of the things like you had mentioned as well was contextualization. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I wanted to swing back there and for a minute. But contextualization, I do think is really important with the culture. That was actually something that you can probably find an old blog post I wrote ages ago on my way out of the fundamentalist movement, where I talked about use that particular word because I just was really struggling with that. So that is really important to our world, and I think it's really important because when we're seeing what the cultural conversation is right now. I mean, when was the last time you ever thought we would be talking about the evidence of even like the resurrection publicly on every news channel ever? Joe Rogan's having is like, what is going on? So it's so cool to see that happening. But one of the other things that yes, it's important that One Life is doing that. And I think more churches should be aware of that happening. Otherwise, they could end up losing people or being caught off guard. However, one of the things I wanted to talk about, I'm really big on, of course, unity in the church. Everyone knows that the church split's supposed to be ironic, the name. Unfortunately ends up having people find me on Twitter or sometimes or on YouTube, and they instantly just comment, "Oh, just another edgy atheist channel." I'm like, no. I'm like, no, I'm not saying I'm splitting from church. I'm saying church is split.
Sometimes people aren't as good at irony as others.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But one of the things that I have pushed, and I even preached it here, is unity and diversity. And one of the cool things, so when you're talking about like the theological and the philosophical and this over here and how where those two worlds meet, one of the things I was fascinated with was when I first had staff dinner when I came up to interview. And of course, when you're doing that, you already know grilling is about to take place. So I sit down, I'm like, all right, here it comes. And there's what do you think about women in ministry? What do you think about all the non-divisive topics whatsoever, right? So I just kind of was like, all right, I'm just going to say, these are my biggest hot takes. I don't believe Augustinian original sin. I don't believe in, eternal conscious torment. I don't believe in penal substitution. I don't believe in blah, 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 blah. Right. And it was funny. And I will still, your face will always be burned into me at that moment because you kind of smirked. And then you went, okay, that's not that bad. Penal substitution is a little weird though. And you said this little funny thing. I was like, well, maybe I just shot my shot and died, whatever. But then it was funny because even though I got hired, despite the difference of, because I mean, I'm sure I could go around everyone in that room on a Sunday morning and we all have different theological positions on a number of things. Yeah. You and me have different theological, whatever. And I was told by everyone that it's impossible to have unity and diversity. Nope, that's impossible. That's why you need the denominations. You can't have people who have that sort of thing. But what's interesting, I think, is actually what you created, what the Lord created through. Obviously, okay, right. We'll do the pious thing for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, make sure we check the box. But what's interesting is that because of the mission of One Life, it's interesting where I think it actually allows the unity and diversity of certain views. So, do you have any thought on that as how that can actually help encourage unity at all? Do you think, or do you think that just causes more trouble? Could cause
which encourages unity, just
being able to have like some theological flexibility in there.
Yeah, well, I would always argue, and I've seen this because after going through the very first split I went through, which I was, with our parachurch thing and getting into these discussions, because I used to challenge those guys all the time that all of us do this, all of us do, no matter what, because each of us, if you keep examining, you're going to run into a thing. My wife is a dispensationalist. I mean, and I'm not. So, well, we're still married. I mean, and what I mean by that is you've decided that that's a thing that it's okay to, we can square that circle. Because, for obvious reasons, and everyone does that. John MacArthur is one of my favorite. He's a dispensationalist. He hangs around with a bunch of Reformed people, and they give him a get-out-of-jail-free card because he's kind of edgy and he doesn't care what anybody says, and he calls guys like me heretics and all that stuff. So they like him. So. Okay, you can be in the club, even though that whole thing that you interpret Daniel on, well, we'll let that pass. You let people pass all the time in your movement. You just do. Or if you don't, they become continually sort of all the way down to the point where you almost can't have anybody in the room.
Right.
Now, and C.S. Lewis is a great example too. I've watched that guy get free passes on all kinds of things from every evangelical circle because everybody wants him on the team. Okay? Even though you believe in purgatory, and he said his mentors, George MacDonald. George MacDonald is even wackier as far as his Calvinism stuff and all that.
Oh yeah.
So, but it's funny to watch. So we all do that. But it's just kind of based on who we want in the room and all this kind of. Who do we want on the team? I define that, but I would just push back on anybody. Now, obviously, and it sounds kind of cliche to say, going back to mere Christianity of the original, doctrinal statements, the creeds and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that is a thing because we all do it, and then you just. everybody kind of expands out, and I decided to expand out. Now, when you said your penal substitution thing, I happen to know that it was historically the church's thing.
Right.
So I didn't go like, it wasn't like this weird thing, because if it would have been a weird thing, like, holy cow, I think that's like a Jehovah's Witness thing or whatever, that would have been different from, okay, the church historically
had defined us
swam in those
differently.
waters. And so who am I to kind of, so I'll give grace on that. And I even give grace to dispensationalists. I have to. I'm married to one. So how that goes. I mean, and she's a pre-tribber, and she's always saying, I'll see you when you get there and all that kind of stuff. And so, but we've learned that's not one of those things that's just to cancel out. But if you said, I don't believe Jesus, literally, physically, bodily rose again from the dead, I'd be like, hey, the beard's awesome. You got a lot going for you, but I'm going to usher you down the street.
Peace out, Girl Scout.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, but again, I would argue I do it. I have the reasons why I do that, but everybody does it in one form or the other.
That's a great observation.
The ones that really don't do it, and the ones that really don't do it is like, okay, you do it somewhere by the books you read. I mean, and even when you said, what was is annihilationism? It's not that. What was it? Eternal conscious torment.
Oh, yeah.
The annihilationism thing, I'm a big John Stott fan, and because he's just amazing. But I learned that was him after I became a fan.
Oh,
he was that.
Yeah,
I was like,
funny.
oh, am I still allowed? But he had already made me a fan for a number of other things. He said.
100%.
So that's the other thing. And then you also look at your own travels. I started as a dispensational, and I didn't even know there was another option. I was raised in a church that was waiting. Yeah, I wish we'd all been ready. We're all. I was raised with that. It was in the movies and all that stuff. So Left Behind, of course. It wasn't until I got to college that I was like, I'm kind of thinking no.
Oh yeah, same.
It took me a while to say no, because that was my whole world. But we've all got things like that that we've allowed enough grace for ourselves to travel that whole journey. So who am I to let?
And at the heart of that, I think that's actually part of the key to having unity in the church as well, which is realizing, like, all right, Nicene Creed, are you a Christian? Did Jesus Christ bodily raise from the dead? Okay, great. Then the rest of the stuff we could probably just talk about over coffee and have some slight differences. But if we're on board with the same mission and vision, and leadership is handling itself well, then I think that helps us get a long way.
Yeah, because you do that. Since I've had a chance to travel and be with Christians from around the world, that's what everybody does on the initial. You can typically pick up on someone who believes all the real things, that Jesus, God, man, incarnate, the whole thing, and the resurrection and the atonement, all these stuff that you can sense that almost with everybody, and it is the unifier on an intuitive level. But I guarantee you, if you started, sitting everybody down, what about and you go deeper and deeper and deeper down. Oh, what you don't believe in fill in the blank,
right?
And then it's going to ruin that. But and here's the other thing I noticed too. I've been in persecuted countries. It's fascinating about what they care about, what they don't care about.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, that's that. I mean, you get down to the basics in a hurry, because you're just, you believe Jesus rose again from the dead? Okay, we're good. He's incarnate. Yeah, we're good. And I just noticed we have the luxury of arguing over things that people in those countries just don't argue.
That's exactly
over
it.
Can't.
I had a good friend of mine who was a missionary to China, and
that's where some of mine came from.
Yep, and that's what he talked about too. He's like, and he's like, it's funny that people bicker about eschatology. Like, are you pre-trib, mid-trib? Are you amil? Are you what? It's like all they do when they read it over there is they think, in the end, we're on the winning team. Oh, yeah. That's all they care about when they read Revelation, is that we win.
Because they might get arrested, and they'll sit there and just kind of pore over the scriptures and read a chapter from John and just pray over it, and that's the doctrine for the evening.
Yeah,
that's it.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So
it kind of puts things into perspective a little bit. What we bicker about,
big time, because I had been in the worship wars and all that sort of thing. Like, I had a Chinese couple that had served in the underground church and everything came to our church, and I was embarrassed at how loud it was. And I'll never forget the image of them walking in there and they just raise their hand and start crying. I mean, it was stuff that I was like, oh my gosh, because they were all just acoustic and being
real quiet.
Yeah. But they came in that and they just embraced it right out of the gate and just loved it. They loved the fact that they could worship freely. So
Right. And well, that goes a long way. I mean, so that kind of goes to show the fact that some of the things that we bicker about are just kind of trivial and sad. And it's just a luxury. It's a first world privilege, if you will.
And I think, and someday you and I will have this conversation. We should, I'm always interested in how people arrived at places.
Me too.
Because that's the mercy I try to give to everybody who's got any sense at all, is that they feel like they have character sense, is there's a journey in there somewhere that you did start this way in my dispensational left behind world. And then, it started with Bible study in my dorm room in college. And then I thought this, and then I was exposed to that. And then I heard from this person, and it just shaped me and changed me. But it didn't, we have a lady here that teaches that she's a big time dispensationalist.
Oh yeah,
yeah, but man, that's the place I came from, and it's her brother-in-law that I credit God used to save my life. So what am I gonna do? I'm too good to be with these people. Turn my nose
up to them.
I wouldn't even be in the room if it wasn't for these people.
Right.
So that's a very important thing. You got to remember where your grace came from as well.
Yeah. Amen. That's really good. So to everyone then, real quick listening, and as we wrap up here real fast, and I know you got to go pick up grandkids. We got a life going on. I got 1,000 things going on the next 2 weeks, so we'll be right. Pray for me, y'all. Anyway, so with you, what would you, if you were sitting down with somebody right now who said, I'm starting to plant a church, and I got this new team and all that, what would be something that you're like, all right, these are the nuggets that I want you to take away to, to prevent you from making mistakes that we made in the past? Do you have any of those off the top of your head?
The first thing is we would go around the room, and if we did do this right, why do you want to do this? Why? And don't say the cliche things. I really want to know why. What's going on internally? Why are you signing up to do this at all? Because church planting, by the way, is very, very, very difficult thing, and the stats are there to do that. Number one. Number two is share out what you expect. They say disappointment is the difference between reality and expectation, right?
Yeah.
So, and what does everybody really expect? Because in our One Life world with our multi-sites, we actually merged with another church originally, and everybody kind of had surface expectations, but beneath the surface expectations were very different, and we discovered that too late. We were public, and it was a mess, and so there was that, and I've learned that people, and then three, kind of examine everybody's paradigms. What paradigms are you working off? I assume way too much with people on philosophical issues and artistic issues and all that, and why we don't do X or why we do Y. And you can't do that. You have to really figure out, why are we doing this? That's that middle place. We have our doctrine, and I'm assuming you're going to have sense enough to, are we all sign off on this? Signing off on the program, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do FPU or whatever. But it's not that. It's that middle space of why we do the things week in and week out that we do, whether it's playing certain songs or not playing certain songs or whatever, but make sure, and then you give everybody the opportunity to speak into it. And then you keep it up. And you create opportunities. Just create context where people can keep talking about those things. Hey, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Where are you? And that kind of stuff. But I do think the leader's job is to create those contexts of evaluation and all that sort of stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah,
that would be what I would hold to, those basics.
And I would say that's one of the things that I really actually do enjoy actually working here on staff is one of the first places. I actually think I interviewed One Life more than they interviewed me, honestly, just because I'm like, I've seen it, and I ain't going to move my entire family if this isn't going to be. And it's one of the things where I'm like, oh, we actually have a pretty open, upfront staff. Like, we're able to kind of just be like, hey, yo, this is going to work. Hey, we're going to do that. And it's just really, really refreshing. So, and I can say it does seem like it creates a healthier environment for everyone to work in.
You have to know it mentally. If you're in your spot, I have a place I know is coming up where I can voice something that I'm concerned about. What happens in churches is, if you don't have a context, you feel like you're being divisive by bringing it up where everybody's having lunch or to one person while you're over there in the corner.
Right.
Well, no, I want to be able to go to a meeting. Hey, okay, how'd things go? And what are we thinking? And what's good? What's not so good? What do we need to change? And then you can argue about it. But if everybody
right.
knows the context is for that, then that's a lot healthier. And if you have it on a rhythm,
Right.
That's where you really need to live.
100%. So, well, that's really helpful, Brett. And real quick, just for everyone who's watched this, if you're watching this, you've already watched this long, I know you're probably familiar with the channel at this point, but go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't. But real quick, Brett, I always say that there is, and I forgot to mention this as a question I always ask at the end, but, it's not that big of a question.
Okay.
But so I'm really big on uniting the divided body. It's something I've done for a long time. So how do you think your vision and your philosophy, the things that you've learned, how do you think you can help unite the divided body?
How do I think I could unite the divided body? Wow. I think some of it is trying to get everybody to think through where they do that anyway. You do allow people in your circle that don't square with everything that you believe. It's almost giving grace to your journey. But what I could do for it is to be a demo of it. I believe in trying to stay orthodox but contemporary. I believe in that, but I deeply believe in being orthodox and biblical. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the relevant churches bend towards the pragmatic too much, and I have a lot of sympathies there. And I want to be able to show that a church can be loud and do all the things, but still be orthodox and creedal and biblical and do proper exposition and all those things. That's very important to me. Just do it in that context.
Yep.
So that's why we do the readings from history and we do the readings of the Bible. I want people to, after they pull out their little earplugs, they just read from the book of Romans. Okay, they must be okay.
Yeah. Or they just did
I
it.
think if I'm answering your question right.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's being
perfect.
a demonstration of that for the sake of mission.
By the way, just for the record, I think that is one of the greatest things ever. When I showed up in worship set and you guys did like a reading from like John Chrysostom or something, I was like, they know they exist, because like some churches don't even know they're early church at all. So it's great. But well, Brett, I really appreciate your time. Everyone, go ahead, let us know what did you think about this interview in the comments below. Also, that'd be great. What were some of the things that you think that you've learned throughout this, and also what are some of the key takeaways from this conversation with Brett Nicholson here at One Life? So guys, thank you all for watching, and we'll
go see
you.
One Life Network channel as well.
Go check out One Life Network. Yes. He's the front man over there.
Especially that one with my philosopher friend that no one watches.
I get it, but
like 300 views or something.
The videos that are my favorite are the ones that I'm always like, come on, guys. I threw that other one together. Y'all click that one, not the one I actually did research on. Exactly. But anyway, but Brett really is, and I mean this, and I don't want to just fluff your feathers at the end, but it really is true. Brett's one of the you're probably the best pastor I've ever worked under. You're I'm very privileged to work with you. I love One Life, and I love the vision here. So it's something that's really cool just to see and be a part of, and being able to have the privilege to ask you about it and talk to how it all happened.
I appreciate that.
So guys, go check out One Life Network, and also Trinity Radio, who's also part of the network as well.
Yeah, big time.
Check them all out. So take care, guys. God bless, and may the Lord, may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ dwell with you all richly. Take care.